Dating in the modern world is an absolute nightmare. Couple of stories. If you've been out of the game for a while, from New York and online about what it's like out there. There's a woman in Greenpoint. She was going to go on a date with an ex-boyfriend. They were rekindling an old flame. Before she went on the date, she thought, I'm going to Google my ex-boyfriend and just see what he's been up to recently. And along the other things that came up, a sort of suspicious news story came up about a previous girlfriend that he'd had between their relationship. And this previous girlfriend had actually, not kidding, suddenly passed away by suddenly and mysteriously falling off the side of a mountain. She went to this date, and about an hour in, all that this boyfriend had done was talk about how mad he was at his boss for suspending him from work for anger management training that he had to go to. And she left and said, you know what? I'm not going to pursue this story any further. We're done. There was a man who was on a date with someone he'd met on Tinder. He was on a Tinder date with this woman at a bar on the Upper East Side. Things are going well. They're having good conversation. All of a sudden in the back, he sort of hears this noise. Someone's yelling in the back of the bar and is yelling about, and someone had locked their child in the bathroom. How could you lock our child in the bathroom? And people are sort of chuckling around what's happening? And he's like, this is sort of this funny, weird background thing that's happening, until he realized that the person who's yelling is yelling at the person who he's on a date with. This hypothetically single, childless woman that he'd met, someone's coming in going, how could you have locked our child in the bathroom? There's a woman on Bumble. She gets matched with someone on Bumble. They're chatting. This guy starts talking about all of his accolades, starts bragging more and more about all these things that make him wonderful. He starts bragging about his recent participation in a significant, newsworthy historical event, namely the recent January 6th insurrection. This is literally a photo of their Bumble conversation. I did storm the Capitol. She ends up replying, we are not a match. She reports him to the FBI, who found ample information about this man's activity and arrested him and charged him with sedition for his actions. This woman is a hero. What on earth is wrong with dating? What has happened? What has happened to the world of dating, and what on earth has gone wrong with it? And look, it's one thing to look at these things and laugh, and yet what's going wrong with the dating world is not separate from the fact that we have our own hopes and longings about finding some meaningful long-term relationship, and we don't know any other avenue to get there than navigate this absolute hellscape that is the world of modern dating. What has gone wrong with the world of modern dating? How can we navigate this world of dating better, and is there any hope for us to have better experiences in our dating relationships? These are the questions we're going to be asking today. I've titled today's sermon, Can't the Dating World Just Get Along? We're in the middle of a sermon series titled Can't We All Just Get Along? Where we're talking about relationships, and we're searching the scriptures for biblical wisdom on forming and keeping healthy relationships. And today we're talking about dating relationships. We talked about relationships in community. Last week we talked about relationships in family. And today we're talking about dating relationships. Our text today is going to be Genesis chapter 24, verses 10 to 28. A little bit of a longer scripture passage. So if you're able to flip to the text, I'd encourage you to go there today in a Bible or in a device. I will read the text aloud. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, easy to find. Open up the Bible, bam, you're in Genesis. Again, it's Genesis chapter 24, verses 10 to 28. This is what the text says. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening, the time when women go out to draw water. And he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say, drink, and I will water your camels. Let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her water jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very attractive in appearance, a maiden whom no man had known. She went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. She said, drink, my lord, and she quickly let down her jar upon her hand and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for your camels also until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran again to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels and said, please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. She added, we have plenty of both straw and fodder and room to spend the night. The man bowed his head and worshipped the Lord and said, blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman. Then the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. Dating in the modern world is incredibly difficult. In 2020, Pew researched a large study that they had done, getting some different statistics on people's experiences and realities of the modern dating world. Some results of that study are up on the screen. 60% said my dating life is not going too well or not going well at all, which I thought that was kind of cruel language to pick in the study, that you're like, select here, choose this option, not going well, or it's not going too well. 75% of it said it's very or somewhat difficult. 56% said they can't find someone who meets their expectations. 65% say it's hard to find someone who's looking for the same kind of relationship as they are. And of course, within that, 65% of women report having experienced some kind of harassment, and 40% of women say that they've been pressured on a date to have sex. Why is this harder? The study picked up a couple things about why it's harder. Men generally say that technology's made it harder. Women also say that technology has made it harder, but women generally report that increased risk has made dating life harder. Women are twice as likely as men to say that there's heightened risk in the world of modern dating, and that makes modern dating harder. It's not just, however, a question of the modern dating scene. The online nature of much of the modern dating scene has led to specific and challenging dynamics in modern dating. In 2023, Pew Research released a survey with a bunch of data specific to dating in the U.S. online. In 2023, there was a Pew Research data on U.S. online dating. It says 50% of people under 30 have tried an online dating app. Tinder, according to the Pew Research study, was the most popular app, with 50% of users of an online app being on or having tried Tinder. The next closest dating app has 30% retention. Tinder, of course, is really a hookup app rather than a dating app, and we're going to come back to this observation. In particular, if you are between the ages of 18 or 29, 80% of users from 18 to 29 are on Tinder specifically. 45% of people said they were on dating apps to find a long-term partner. 40% they were around to date casually. 25% said to have casual sex. And around 22% said to make new friends, which, to have casual sex. Which, let's just recognize that those numbers add up to more than 100%, which is another insight that we will come back to later. People were split roughly 50-50 on whether or not apps were ultimately a net positive or a net negative, although that split was about 55 men a net positive, 45 women a net negative. And finally, 52% of respondents said that they were pretty sure that at some point someone had tried to scam them through an online dating app. There were smaller studies and surveys about the effects that dating apps are having on people's sense of well-being, their mental health, their social anxiety, and multiple studies in the last few years have noted the link between the use of dating apps and decreasing mental health, with users experience higher rates of mental distress, anxiety, depression, and loneliness. The reality is that these statistics reflect have led cultural commentators to remark on many aspects of how bleak and depressing the state of modern dating is. And there are a few themes that people have pulled out when they write about the state of modern dating. One theme is just sheer exhaustion. People are just exhausted from the state of modern dating. They're exhausted from the time it takes. They're exhausted from efforts that they've sowed into not going anywhere. They're exhausted from getting on the app again and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and the physical and mental toll and emotional toll that that takes on people. And one commentator writing in the New York Times in an article titled "The Toll of Dating App Burnout" said this: "After a decade of fruitless searching, I started to ask myself, what has all that time, all that effort, all that money actually given me? When you are consistently disappointed by a space, an online dating app space, that was sold to you as a path to love over and over and over again, for many of us, for years at a time, you never really stop to ask yourself, what is this doing to my mental health, and what is this doing to my well-being?" This insight bleeds into a second major insight aside from sheer exhaustion, namely how app culture is destroying dating and how app culture is destroying the quality of modern dating. It undermines basic elements of accountability and faithfulness because an app culture is just built to give you a world of options and to help you cycle through those options as fast as you can until you find the option that you want and that you're interested in. And that is inimically opposed to ideas of accountability and faithfulness and trustworthiness that are utterly central for the building of any serious relationship. Furthermore, these apps are built to be addictive, and they're built by people who know how to make them addictive. As a result, these apps don't really want you to find a satisfying long-term relationship where you'll never be back again. They want you to come back, and they want you to come back over and over again. All of these things, of course, are anecdotally just exacerbated to an absolute fever pitch in New York. All the stats that I've pulled are from the United States, and everyone knows that if the dating scene is that way in the United States, it is worse in New York. There are some insane articles, a couple insane articles, who think that, New York is like one of the top 10 cities in the world to find your soulmate, or something like that. And of course, these articles are just pulling from sort of metrics about how big the pool of people is and how many bars there are and how many different bars there are for you to go do stuff. So sure, if your metric is raw numbers, cool, you've got 1.2 million people or whatever on dating apps, and you got a lot of bars to go and meet all those Tinder dates. Oh, incredible. New York's the place I'm going to find my soulmate. In reality, everybody knows New York City is an incredibly difficult place to have any kind of meaningful dating relationship. It's incredibly unlikely you're just going to meet somebody accidentally. No one has a meet cute story about meeting someone on the subway. It doesn't happen. It's incredibly difficult. No one has any time. No one has the time to invest in serious relationships. New York City is incredibly expensive, and dating websites who factor in the cost of dating in New York. Once someone factors in the cost of dating in New York City plummets down the charts for the quality of the dating scene. One recent list placed New York City at number 144 in the United States, right between Huntington, West Virginia, and Aurora, Illinois, because it's so expensive. You can't date for under $100 a date. New York City is incredibly competitive, and New York City has a culture that tries to get you to love and lust after the next best thing, which does not lend itself towards faithfulness. Indeed, there is a New York City Facebook group titled "Are We Dating the Same Guy NYC?" that has over 130,000 followers. Finally, all of these problems are exacerbated for Christians. Where Christians are trying to date other Christians in already an incredibly difficult, hostile environment, and the pool just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Furthermore, we live in a time and a place where really people are shaped more by the dynamics of the city than they are by the scriptures. And so when someone identifies as a Christian in a dating context, frankly, that word can mean anything. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And people feel totally fine saying, I'm a Christian as some sort of dating identifier without having that mean anything about what they believe about Jesus, what they believe about salvation, what they believe about the authority of the scriptures, what they believe about anything that makes being a Christian something meaningful. You can't tell anymore when you hop into a dating app and someone says, I'm a Christian. Are they talking about their upbringing? They're probably not talking about their moral fiber. They're talking about some strange identifier that means something, but that doesn't mean enough to give you confidence about what that means about who they are as a person. People are trying to date in an incredibly difficult and bleak environment. And the reality is that just because the environment is challenging doesn't mean our longings cease or stop or go away. Those longings continue, and yet we experience more and more pain over time as we experience dating and those longings not being satisfied in an incredibly challenging and hostile environment. Many of us want a relationship, and so we're trying to figure out dating in this time in New York City as a Christian in an environment that's hostile to these things. And so we're trying to navigate a lost culture with a shrinking pool of people and wondering if, frankly, we should just give up or give in. And it feels like there's no hope and there's nowhere to turn. But the Bible has something to say about dating in the modern world, which, thank God, the Bible does. Because otherwise, we would have questions that come up in our lives that are incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging, and we would have nowhere to go to get wisdom or insight on that topic. And yet the Bible speaks to every aspect of our lives. It talks about everything that we're going to go through, every feeling that we're going to have, every cultural pressure that we're going to go through. Some people think that there are things that the Bible doesn't speak about. The Bible talks about everything that you are going to experience in this life. And as a result, it's different from every other resource you're going to find. It's different from every other book you're going to read that maybe speaks to some feeling you're having or some experience you're having. But the Bible speaks to everything. If we show up to the Bible looking for it to speak to my life, once we show up saying, God, you've given me this book, help me to receive its wisdom, the riches of the Bible open up and are on display. And the Bible, even though it is a book written many thousands of years ago to a people in a different cultural context with different values, has things to say about how to navigate the world of modern dating well. Dating was fraught and challenging for the family of Abraham. There's a caveat or two about the word dating used in this context. I will come back to them. You're maybe thinking about them. But for the moment, dating was fraught and challenging for the family of Abraham. Genesis chapter 24, verse 10 says this, Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, taking all sorts of choice gifts from his master, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. Who is this servant, and where is he going, and why? He's a servant of Abraham, and he's going to find a wife for Abraham's son Isaac from his ancient family, from his relatives. Earlier in the narrative, in Genesis chapter 24, verses 3 to 4, the text says this. This is Abraham speaking to this servant. He says, Swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell, but will go to my country, to my kindred, and take a wife for my son Isaac. Abraham's family, in the context of Genesis chapter 24, lived in a hostile, challenging dating environment. They were a minority people who had unique values and unique beliefs, and they could not just go out into the peoples around them and hope that they were going to stumble into a suitable match. Indeed, when they tried to do that, it always caused problems. With one exception. Anyone know the exception? Top your head. Come on, somebody. The one time in the Bible when they're able to go and find a wife from someone around the people groups. Yeah, Ruth, that's it. Ruth, exactly. And of course, Ruth's quality is on display right at the beginning because she says what? your God will be my God and your people will be my people, right? But generally, they're going out into the world and they're finding people who are shaped by the values of the world, who think about relationships in the way that the world does, and who think about worship in the way that the world does. And that shapes them as certain kinds of people who make it very difficult for them to be a suitable match for the family of Abraham and what God is trying to do. In particular, just as one example, one generation later from this, Isaac is going to have two sons, Jacob and Esau. And Esau, Isaac's eldest son, finds spouses from around the nations. This is what Genesis 26:34-35 says. When Esau was 40 years old, he took Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. Not unlike our own situation, surrounded by a culture with different priorities and different values and a shrinking pool of people from which we might expect to find a good match. That is the world of Genesis 24. And within this situation, the story of Isaac and Rebekah gives us wisdom for navigating dating in such a difficult and challenging environment. And the key piece of wisdom that we're going to look at and try to learn from is this. Dating in a hostile context is incredibly difficult, but not impossible if you date with specificity. When you're dating in a hostile and challenging context, it is difficult, but not impossible if you date with specificity. There is a need for specificity in difficult dating contexts. Sometimes and places can rely on the broader social context, the broader cultural context, where people are sort of living in a shared value sphere, a sort of shared sphere of belief, where you can hope to be able to stumble into a good match in the societal context. And maybe 50 years ago, for Christians generally, the United States was a place like this, where you could sort of generally think that that person was raised in a family who attended a Lutheran church just because, and so we all sort of have a shared idea of what good is. And Christian is already kind of fuzzy, but at least we know we're going to go to church, and we're going to raise our kids in church. And you could sort of know that you could stumble out into these general social spheres that society created for you and find someone who is generally going to be a good match. The modern West is not like this anymore. It isn't like this anymore, especially for Christians. There are some places in the modern West where that's still true. And you maybe know these places. Maybe you're from a place like this. But in general, especially cities, centers of culture in the modern West are not like this anymore. And New York City, for sure, is not like this anymore. You cannot stumble out into the social context that New York City makes available for you when you're trying to find a relationship and think that the odds are in your favor that you're going to stumble into someone who is relationship material. Now, I want to say really briefly, I want to caveat really quickly. This doesn't mean that there's no place for casual dating. And we could have a different conversation about if you are casually dating, or if you're like, I'm in a place where I'm just trying to learn how to go on dates. I'm just meeting people and we're talking and, wonderful, great. And you're doing that without, pairing that with words or bodily actions that are outpacing the level of commitment that you have. There's totally a place to talk about casual dating. So if you're here and you're like, oh my gosh, Adam, you're sounding kind of intense. We're talking about relationship material. We're going to talk about marriage. This sounds intense. There's totally a place to talk about casual dating. But if we are honest, when we're thinking about like pain that we have from a dating scene over a long period of time, that's pain that we have often because we are looking for a long-term relationship, or as it used to be called, a marriage. We are looking for those things, right? And so we're assuming now, just in this moment, just in this context, that's sort of generally what dating is leading towards, or what we're looking for. It's not the only thing to say, and if you've got other things to say about it, it's okay. There are multiple things to say, but this is sort of what we're talking about today. The world of Genesis 24 was like this as well. Abraham's family could not stumble out into the world and assume that they were going to find a suitable match in the social context. Now, of course, here's the caveat. In ancient dating, your parents did it for you. And actually, as I was thinking about this, and I was like, I don't know. 65% of women report they've been harassed. 40% say they've been pressured to have sex on a date. If you need someone to sit down with someone for 15 minutes and say, should I spend any time on this person? I will gatekeep for you. I'm just letting you know. And maybe you need to find someone who will do that for you in your life. You can decide. You're empowered to do your own stuff with your own dating life. But I'm sure we have some people who would love to gatekeep if you need some gatekeeping done. I'm just saying. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not matchmaking. I will tell you if the answer's no. Pastors shouldn't matchmake. Don't matchmake. No. But does this person just need a hard no? I will tell you. In the ancient world, your parents did the dating for you, and it happened in a much faster period of time. But the things that they're looking for, honestly, are the same. The things that they're looking for and the wisdom that we should be drawing from a story like this is exactly the same, even if we are generally the ones doing it and if it's happening over a longer period of time. There are three kinds of specificity that we see in this text that we should be learning from if we want to date well in a hostile modern context. The first is specificity of character. Genesis chapter 24, verses 12 to 14. This is what the text says. Lord, God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I'm coming standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar that I may drink, and who shall say in reply, drink, and I will water your camels, let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I shall know that you have shown steadfast love to my master. Now, what is this about? At first, in a rural, ancient context, it maybe looks like, how strong is this woman? And I have to say, I do know someone who is from, a modern sort of rural context who has this wonderful story of working on a home project, and so they went to Lowe's and they got a bunch of stuff and took it out to their car and picked up this big bag of sod and tossed it in the back of their car, and they turned around and there was this guy just standing there, and he just said, "You married?" Oh, it was Stanzy's mom. So there are places in the world where that is maybe still happening. But what this is really about is an internal disposition of a particular character. Because in the ancient Near East was a violent and uncertain place, and so hospitality was incredibly valued. And not everyone offered hospitality, but those who did were seen to be of superlative internal character. And so what the servant here is looking for is someone who not just participates in hospitality, but who does it in a superlative way. Because she's not just saying, you are a weary traveler, let me grab you a drink. Let me get you and all your camels water. Camels can drink around 30 gallons of water in one sitting. And the master has 10 camels with him. So she's drawing 300 gallons of water. I mean, I don't know. I think she probably didn't draw that much. But that's what she's saying. I will water all these. So he's looking for a sign that is reflective of a particular internal disposition and internal character. That also is why they've taken the trouble to go look from this particular family. They're trying to look for someone whose internal life is shaped according to certain things that are different from the ways of the world. In our world, people are looking for anything in the modern dating scene except for someone's internal life. We're literally looking for anything else. That 2020 Pew study has a list of relational deal breakers that it names, that people had 13 relational deal breakers. I'm not going to run through what they are. All you need to know is that none of them have anything to do with who someone is on the inside. None of them. They're all externals. They're all different kinds of externals that might be relational deal breakers. Physical attraction, someone that's new and exciting, money, worldly criteria, whatever it is. Those are fine things to look for if you're screwing around. But, if you're not, those aren't the things to be looking for. They just aren't. If people aren't looking for physical externals, sometimes they're looking for experiential externals. People are looking for love. What is love? And sure, there's a part of love, absolutely, that is about passion and attraction and even at times infatuation, but there's a part of love that is just about the lived choice and faithfulness to somebody across time. Look, this is reality. If you are saying, I'm just marrying for love, our society is the society who has tried out the marry for love hypothesis. Okay, we're doing it right now. And nobody is as good at getting divorced as our society. We are. Our relationships fall apart. And so you should look at that and recognize, I'm in a society that says I should just be dating, marrying for love. All those, again, it should be part of your relationship. But we are the society that says that is the first word and the last word. Do I have some infatuated passion with and towards this person? And you should just look at that and recognize that relational breakdown is a feature and not a bug of our societal approach to relationships. For a godly marriage, there is nothing more important than someone's internal life. There is nothing more important. 1 Samuel chapter 16:7 says, "For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Of course, physical attraction should be part of a relationship. It's mentioned in this passage that Rebekah was found to be physically attractive. Delight in physical appearance is a joy. It's part of a healthy, godly, romantic relationship, but it's not the main thing, and it certainly is not the stable thing over the course of a relationship. I have news for you. Your body's going to change over the course of your life. And the body of the person who you are infatuated with is going to change over the course of your life. And you are going to have to learn over time how to love each other's bodies as they change. Physical attraction is not even the most stable thing in our pursuit of a meaningful long-term relationship. A marriage, a successful long-term relationship reveals the foundations of a person. It inevitably, every time, reveals who somebody actually is. And all the externals count for nothing when you're in a situation where a marriage is revealing who are you really at your core. Are you true? Are you faithful? Are you selfless? And the big one, that's the best predictor of all those things, are you in rebellion against God? We have to date with specificity with respect to character. And if we're wanting a long-term stable relationship, the first thing on our priority list should be dating people of high internal caliber. And we can see very early on when we're dating somebody what kind of person they actually are. How do they speak to me? How do they treat me? How do they treat their family? Do they love wisdom? Are they self-obsessed, just fitting me into their life or their dating scheme? And the best predictor of all, do they actually have a living and loving relationship with their Creator? Now, if we want to get to a point where we want to date this kind of person with specificity, the next question becomes, where do I find them? Where are they? Especially in a world that doesn't value these things in the dating game, and so it makes people hard and harder to find. Where do I go when I'm looking for someone of this kind of caliber in a world that makes them hard to find? And you have to have the second kind of specificity. You have to have specificity of location. You have to have specificity of character and then specificity of location. In Genesis 24, we see that Abraham's servant went from where Abraham was in Canaan to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. This is a map of the journey that his servant went on. Okay, that little blue circle is the extent of the Holy Land. That little blue circle, Jesus lived his whole life in that little blue circle. And Abraham sent his servant like 3 times the distance away from that. That's where Abraham was. Abraham was where that little flag is, Beersheba. Abraham sent his servant like about 550 miles away to look with incredible specificity in the one place where they thought they might find someone of this kind of character. Not only that, but what did the servant do right when he got there? He went right to the well, which is where the women of character would be. They would be there drawing water. Genesis 24:11, he went to outside the city by the well of water at the evening, at the time when women go out to draw water. They went with incredible specificity, with focus and clarity of purpose to put themselves in the best possible place to find someone who might have this kind of internal character. And we have to do this if we are talking about dating in a hostile context in the modern world, because you cannot just hope to stumble in all the different contexts that the modern world gives us. You cannot hope to just stumble into a place where you're going to find somebody who values these same things. So, obviously, physical spaces are a large question about this. I know that you think about this with respect to church. Some of you might think about this with respect to family. I know you're already considering those sorts of questions. Can we think about this just with some specificity for a second about the major space where people are trying to find a spouse today or a long-term quality dating relationship? That is online. Online is a particular space, and we have to engage in that space with the specificity of location with respect to that space. Here's a slide from the data gathering source Statista that talks about the most popular dating apps in the U.S. This one puts Tinder a little slightly less popular than the Pew Research study did. Right? If you look at these dating apps, right, there's a range of quality represented even here. Right? And some of you know the ins and outs of these apps better than I do. It was the mercy of the Lord that I did not have to do the dating app thing, and honestly, God bless you and be with you and heal you and comfort you if you are having to navigate this right now. Right? There's a range of things here. Some of these apps, they're just hookup apps. They're called dating apps, but they're hookup apps. They're for casual sex. You will not find someone on one of these apps. As I've said that, I do know one godly Christian couple who they're the only godly Christian couple who ever met on Tinder. They will sheepishly tell you, where did you meet? They'll go, Tinder. And they will, they'll very, very slow. But again, this is just about odds. It's so unlikely. Some of these apps are dating apps, but you'll have people on those apps they're kind of seriously dating, but they're also kind of casually dating. And again, when we looked at those stats earlier in the sermon, those numbers added up to more than 100%. In other words, some people say, I'm here for a serious relationship, but they also say, I'm here for a casual relationship, which you can't be there for both at the same time. You cannot show up somewhere looking for a serious relationship and then behaving like you're looking for something casual. They're mutually exclusive. You can't do both at the same time. One or two of these apps are ostensibly, like I'm aware Coffee Meets Bagel is bills ostensibly for people who are looking for a serious long-term relationship. If you are dating, and this is one of the major modern spaces that you have accessible to you, you should be in these spaces and you should be in them with incredible specificity. You should be on the platforms that are obviously built for helping people find long-term relationships. And honestly, this does not mean it will work for everyone, but every single couple that I know, every single person who I know who said, I'm going to get on a site like eHarmony and be on there with incredible specificity about who I am, what Jesus means to me, and what I'm looking for, they are married in long-term stable marriages. They said, I'm going to get into a place that's about long-term relationships, and I'm going to be incredibly specific about why I'm there and how I'm talking about myself while I'm on there. I know a couple who this is essentially their story, and the first thing that the man said about the woman is, I read her profile, and she talked about Jesus in the profile. Like, people use the word Christian to mean all sorts of things, but this person said, Jesus is the first priority in my life. We've got to be incredibly specific about who we are while we are in these spaces. And really honestly, if this is your top priority in your life and you're in a place like New York, I would suggest to you honestly that you date regionally or globally. That's what happened in this passage. Like, they left where they were to go find someone who was way over there. Now, if this is not the top priority in your life right now, maybe you'll say, okay, I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I'm going to keep things a little more closer to New York right now. I'm going to see how things go. But if this is like your number one thing, I want to be in a long-term relationship with a godly spouse, you should be looking at the realities of the modern world and comparing them to the realities of Genesis chapter 24, and you should say, I'm going to be open to people that are outside of the city. Because this is the time that we live in. This is the context that we live in, and this is the kind of specificity that it takes to find a godly spouse. We've got to be specific with what we're looking for in terms of character. We've got to be specific in our location. And finally, we have to have a specificity of purpose. In verses 22 to 23 and 28 of this passage, we see people on both sides of the equation who are clear about why they're there. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms weighing 10 gold shekels and said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in her father's house for us to spend the night?" And later, after he tells her everything, the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. The gifts that the man is giving are signs of what they're here for. They're signs of his intentions. Now, you need to translate this into the modern world. I'm not saying there's all sorts of weird religious things that people have done. You need to court. You need to, whatever. I don't know. And you go into some weird religious view of dating. I'm saying translated into the realities of a modern dating context, we need to be clear about why people are here. Are we hoping that this grows into some sort of long-term relationship, or am I sitting across the table from someone who is just wasting my time? Rebekah is clear about these intentions as well. In Genesis 24, verses 55 to 58, there's this little moment where they're sort of agreeing to the marriage, but then the family is like, "Well, why are you in such a rush? Let's hang out. Let's wait a couple days. Let's see how it goes." And they have this conversation. Her brother and mother said, "Let the young woman remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away, that I may go to my master." They said, "Let us call the young woman and ask her." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." These are people who are just being clear and upfront about why they're there, about the purposes that have brought them to this place. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we dating for, and what is dating for? Again, it could be any number of things for you right now. I'm not here to judge any of the reasons why people are dating. But for people here who are saying, "I want to be in a lasting godly relationship," we have to show up to our spaces with a specificity of purpose. This, just as a brief aside, is a particular problem today with men who don't show up looking to bring anything resembling maturity and commitment to the table. All sorts of statistics inside and outside the church reveal that there is just a reality right now where there are higher quality, more mature women around than men. And it's true outside of the church, and it's true inside the church. And listen. And this is difficult. This is incredibly hard, because the other side of this reality is the lasting pain of being single when I didn't want to. And that is real, and that really hurts, and it is really painful. But I want to say to you, as someone who believes in the caliber of women that are in the church today and that are in this church, that if someone is just casually dating you, especially for a longer period of time, especially if they're taking from you physically, and they will not discuss or show any sign that they're going to bring commitment to the table, this is someone who is treating you like an object and who's asking you implicitly to demean and diminish your sense of yourself so that you will fit into the little box that they've created for you in their life. And you should kick these people to the curb. You should. You should lay down the law with them and give them a chance to reveal that there's better stuff internally than that is really there. But if not, you should kick them to the curb, because we live in a time where no one is going to bring those guys in line. They're not going to go home, and their parents are going to go, "You should have made an honest woman out of so-and-so." Parents these days are just like, "We love our kids, whatever they do." We don't say anything challenging to them. We don't help them grow and mature. Their parents are not going to bring them in line. Their buddies are not going to bring them in line. You have to. You have to be the one that says, "I'm not going to diminish my view of myself and my self-worth in order to fit into this small little box that this man-child is trying to put me into, because I have this pain," right? Because this pain is being eased by this thing. It is better. And again, you have to navigate this in your own life. I'm not trying to speak for anyone, but as someone who values the quality of Christian women that we have in the world today, it is better to be navigating the pain of singleness with God than to be having your self-worth die a slow death at the hands of selfish men who won't give you what you deserve and want you to diminish yourself in order to be with them. These three things, specificity of character, specificity of location, and specificity of purpose, are difficult. They're challenging, but they can make dating in the modern world possible. And if we bring specificity and focus to these things, we will increase the odds that we will find people who also are bringing specificity and focus to these things. At this juncture, we have to ask one challenging question, and that is, if I'm not doing these things already in my dating life, why am I not doing them? And to be really frank, if we're really honest, if we were to give a self-assessment of what we're doing in our dating lives, we might find one or two things that we're being specific about, but there are other ways that we are not. We're not being specific about our location. We're not being specific about the quality of somebody's characters. Why aren't we doing that if we say we're clear about what it is we want out of our dating relationships? And one option to answer this question is maybe that the way of the world has gotten into us a little bit. And while deep down we say we want these things, some of those surface level flesh itches that the world's dating scene offers us is something that we say that we actually want. We want something that feels free and fun and thrilling and full of novelties, and these things are appealing to us, and it's difficult for us to set those aside for a moment so that we can bring the specificity that we want to our dating life. If we were to dig down one more layer, however, maybe we do these things that the world, we take on the world's way of dating, because at the end of the day, the world's way of dating and how the world commends it to you is playing on a certain kind of fear. The world's way of dating essentially says, in order to find the person who's right for you, you have to churn your way through a number of different options. And you can't find someone too quick because maybe you won't have gone through enough options to find the person who's right for you. And so the world is giving you this bevy of options, and there's a fear of investing deeply in one relationship because we're afraid we're going to get it wrong or miss out on the right thing. The proliferation of options is supposed to be a freeing thing, but it ends up being an imprisoning thing because it locks us in a fear of ever believing we're going to find one thing and one person that could be meaningful. Who knows what we will have missed out on? And so in that sense, the world maybe traps us into certain ways of dating out of a fear that we're going to miss the thing that we should have gotten. And in this, maybe we're like St. Augustine, who famously prayed, "God, make me chaste, but not yet." We aren't able to date with purpose in the way that we need to in this time because the world frightens us into a fear of commitments and a fear of specificity, a fear of stating clearly what I'm looking for, a fear of judgment about how people will perceive me if I begin to act with incredible specificity in my dating life. And it tricks us into a sort of favoring a keeping my options open posture towards dating. But the goal of dating is not to keep my options infinitely open until I find some perfect match that doesn't exist. The goal of dating, as a formational context on its own, regardless of what happens, is to be formed myself into the sort of person that I'm looking for in my dating life and relationships, and then to trust and believe God, that He sees me and He knows the longings of my heart. And that as my dating life becomes less about finding someone, it becomes more about becoming a certain kind of person in that dating life and then trusting God with the results, that God is able to take that, if we trust Him, and move us into a more satisfying experience of dating. All of this, as a result, is predicated on being able to believe in God in our dating life. We can date with purpose when we believe in God's plans for our lives and our dating lives. This is what Genesis 24, 26 to 27 says. "The man bowed his head and worshipped the Lord and said, 'Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness towards my master. As for me, the Lord has led me in the way to the house of my master's kinsman.'" There were many, many, many options. Maybe good options, maybe desirable options, maybe attractive options, who knows, options that were immediately limited by the specificity of choices that this man made in this text. and yet he was able to make them with specificity because he believed that God was going to be moving in the actions that he was taking. And that at the end of the day, he could date with specificity because it's not about seeing all the options and stumbling into the right option. It's about God blessing me and seeing me and being with me in my dating. It's a strange thing that dating in the way that I'm talking about in this sermon is only possible for people who believe in God. The specificity of dating that I'm talking about here, the world would tell you it's crushing your options. You're going to miss out on things. You won't learn certain things. The world would say all sorts of things that would make you think, I can't date with this kind of specificity. But when you believe that God will see me in this, and that God is ultimately sovereign over my life and who I end up with, you actually then are able to say no to the fears that the world is running through your mind and date with the kind of specificity that is reflected in Genesis chapter 24. As this happens in our lives, of course, we are being shaped into people who are able to have the kind of relationship that we say we want to have. The reality is that when we date according to the ways of the world, we become built to have worldly relationships. We learn the things of the world and we bring them into our marriages and then hope somehow that our marriages are going to be different from the world. And then, surprise, they're not. But God, when we date in a different way, is able to form us into the sort of person who is then able to have the kind of relationship that we want to have. Jesus mirrors this kind of love for us. 1 John chapter 4:19 says this, we love because he first loved us. And becoming a person who dates with specificity is really about becoming a person who's shaped with love before I'm getting the thing that I wanted. It's about being able to love first and love a future relationship first, even before I have it. And this is the way that God loves us. Jesus loved us before we were relationship material. He became someone who was able to love us in the way that he wanted to live in relationship with us. And when we believe in God in our dating, in the specificity of our dating, there's work to do in this. It's not taking my hands off the wheel and saying, I don't know, God, bring me a spouse. There's specificity, there's clarity, there's internal growth. But when we do that and believe in God, God is able to make us into people who are able to have the kind of relationships that we say we want to have. You should believe in God and date with specificity in the modern world. If you are not at this place yet where you're like, I'm looking now to stop screwing around and stop fooling around with all this stuff, I want something different, then you should just be taking this and saying, how can I do it in my life? Maybe there are some of you who are still on a journey or in a different place. All that's okay. Again, I can only speak to certain things in this sermon. There are other things to say. But if you're in a place of saying, how do I know what I want for my dating life? How do I navigate it in the modern world? You should date with purpose and specificity. Specificity of character, specificity of location, and specificity of purpose. And then believe in God. And trust him and believe in him in it. We want significant long-term relationships. The world is not built anymore to help you find them or help you have them. You have to decide now, before you have the thing you want, to become the sort of person who can have that thing. And to begin to be shaped in your dating life into the specificity of that kind of person and that kind of search. And then trust and trust and trust in God. That even when things look bleak and horrific out there in the dating world, that God is able to see you and answer your prayers. Amen.